I'd like to welcome to the show Nick, which most of the audience know you as Big Daddy Nick. How are you today, buddy?
Good. What an intro. Thank you.
I was like, man, I got to, you know what I mean? I have to. Um, Nick, we got to know you on The Circle season 3, your first trip into the world of Netflix reality. But then recently you were on Netflix's Perfect Match. How did that come about? And was there any hesitation on your part to do another reality show?
Yeah, so obviously Perfect Match, they pulled people from existing shows, so that automatically just put my name in the bucket. I didn't have to apply, which was nice. There was like no interview process. They were just like, you were on a show and you're single. Do this. So I went for that and I was actually really excited for it. And it was obviously very different than the circle in a lot of ways, but I was looking forward to that and hopefully being able to show like other sides of myself that you couldn't see on the circle.
So you arrive at the house, and obviously you're one of the initial members of, because I've spoke to a couple different people that didn't enter till later. I spoke to LC the other day. She didn't enter until like all the way until episode 10, but you entered the house right out the gate. What when you arrive at the house, what kind of happened next for you?
Yeah, honestly, it was such a wild experience. Like we had no idea what to expect. And so I walk in with Joey Sasso. We walk in together, have no idea what we're gonna walk into. Like literally, as we're opening the door, we're just like anything could be on the other side of this. We had no idea. And so we walk in, the house is completely empty except for Francesca. Literally just Francesca is there. And so we don't really know exactly the concept of the show, really. So it's just okay, I guess let's just talk and see what happens. But it was like very scary in a way just because we had no idea what to expect. And I only knew maybe two of the castmates beforehand. So really, I was like meeting all these people for the first time as well.
Oh, that's definitely, yeah. I say I wasn't sure because sometimes, I mean, some of the people I talk to, like they have a level of, all right, well, I knew this person and this person, this person. So it's interesting to even get it from the perspective of not knowing as many people. So you're like really going in blind, right?
Yeah, like I hadn't actually even met Joey Sasso until that moment. Like we were waiting in a car together, waiting to go into the house. And so we were obviously like chatting a bit then, like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? But that was my first time ever talking to Joey like in person.
For sure. One of the things that I loved, especially early on in the show, when you're trying to get a feel for everything, I love that you just shot your shot with no regrets. I love that because there's so many people on the show that just kind of maybe baby stepped it or played it safe. I just felt like you shot your shot without any regrets. Was that your approach heading into it?
Yeah, look, so Nick Lachey came out and explained all the rules, and that was our first time hearing the rules. Like as a viewer, when you hear him saying the rules, that's the exact same time we were told the rules. So really, no one exactly knew what was happening. It's night one. I see Francesca and Dom like walking up the stairs, but it's like the first night of matching, so we don't really know what matching looks like, any of that. So I see them walking away, and in my mind, I had had a good conversation with Francesca before. Watching it back, it looked very awkward. There was a lot of alcohol involved, but in my mind, I was like, "Oh, like there's potential." So I remember like looking over at like some of the camera crew and stuff, trying to figure out like what's happening, and I see their cameras like aiming up at them, and I'm like, "Wait, this is definitely a match happening. Like this is my only shot to like go for it." And then also like in the back of your mind, you know that's going to be a TV moment either way. Like if it works out really well, that's a great TV moment, and if it flops like it did, still a great TV moment. So I was like, there's nothing to lose, shoot your shot. And particularly, there was almost no risk for me because at that time there were five guys, five girls. So even if I didn't match with Francesca, then I knew I could come back, which I did, and then match with someone else without like a risk of being booted off the show that night. But yeah.
Yeah, because obviously things change later on the show, but that night it's 5 for 5. I'm matching with somebody, even if it's not my first choice, might be my fifth choice, whatever that looks like. But then, of course, you match with Savannah, which seemed like a very strategic, partnership at the beginning. And then, of course, you win the first competition. What was it like walking into the boardroom? Obviously, I know you guys say that you kind of had no idea what was kind of going on, but when you get to the boardroom, what was that like?
Yeah, so we ended up winning that first competition, which was awesome. It's nice and validating, even though we were kind of seen as the friend couple. But we get the power, and both of us had come from the show The Circle, which had a very similar element. Like it really was giving me flashbacks to the influencer chats that we had on the circle where we're deciding who to block. And this was a similar concept, but we're deciding like who to bring into the house. So I think her and I both were able to navigate that really well, like complement each other's sort of negotiation style. And it was almost like we had been there before. So that was nice. And luckily we were able to eventually agree on who to bring in. Kind of did like a tit for tat, like, let me bring in Calvin because he really hooked it up for me in the circle. He gave me like a special power. So I was like, I gotta bring him in to like pay him back in the reality TV world. And then she brought in Chase because the thinking was maybe she would match with Chase later. So
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. That's one of my things that I liked about the show is obviously the ever-changing people of coming into the house of really kind of up the stakes of, how are you a perfect match? But it really just whenever it was kind of do or die, fighting for fighting for a battle of a match by the end of the night. But another favorite moment of mine of yours in the show is obviously the kissing competition. I've never seen somebody so confident and everybody just, dude, you were like the underdog that nobody believed in. And then when the scores came coming out, what was it shooting? What was that like shooting that? And then obviously after that, hearing the scores come in, how did that make you feel?
yeah, so I joke on myself a lot and like sort of like roll with the punches, make fun like with the whole Francesca rejection, like on my Instagram, you can see me like posting, just like making fun of myself. I'm all about that. So like when they were earlier sort of guessing who was going to be the best kisser, yeah, they were kind of roasting me and I was like laughing it off, like whatever. But I had actually been told like I've kissed my fair share of girls and I've been actually told in real life, like offset, that I'm a good kisser. So I was actually pretty confident going in. I was like, I've heard it before, like I'm confident. But I was like, no need to brag about it. Hey, if they think they've got it in the bag, no reason to like make them try harder. So it was awesome. And I feel like I needed it too after I mean, on set, only maybe like 3 people saw my first like shoot your shot at Francesca fail. So not everyone even saw that moment, but in my head, I was still thinking about that moment. So it was a nice little redemption to get all the nines across the board. So it was good.
Right, yeah,
Definitely
you
needed.
you were like, man, I need a bounce back moment in the big, and it was like the perfectly timed place one, right? You know what I mean? Like you had the confidence there, so you knew, but it was like, all right, I've got my redemption arc here, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
also another point on that is in general, I am like not the best. So a lot of these reality stars, they're like very suave and stuff. I'm more on the goofy side. And so it is like, even though I am actually a good kisser, a lot of times it's like that first move, I'm not great at like figuring out when to go for it. And so like I hadn't kissed Savannah yet at that time. And so this kind of just like fell in my lap at like the perfect time, like just break the touch barrier without having to like do the awkward like I don't know thing. So yeah, it was good. I got lucky.
yeah, I do love, and it's weird to say it kind of like this, but I did love that about that because you're right. Like just going in for like a first kiss, whether it's whatever, it's weird, it's awkward. So like this is just like giving you a get out of jail free kind of card. You know what I mean? Like, all right, I can do this, and it's safe. So I love that. After episode 5, you did fail to match with anybody, and then you got the boot. But again, a favorite. The return was awesome. Obviously, you come back and you kind of wreak havoc a little bit. What was it like in between that process, and then of course, whenever you get the call, hey, you're coming back to the show.
Yeah, so I had already matched with Inez and it didn't work out like romantically. And so on the night I left, Inez was choosing between me, Chase, or Shane. And like in her interviews, she's like, this is the worst case scenario. Like I've already matched with Nick, it didn't work, already matched with Shane and it didn't work. And then I guess she just didn't even like Chase. So she kind of had to like pick one of us. And I remember like she came over to me. I don't think she was going to ask me my match or anything, but I remember like that night when we were all three standing there, she came up to me and I was like, Inez, like, I think you're great, but clearly we didn't work already. So there's no point in me staying here. Like, I didn't want to just stay in the house for airtime. Like, I wanted to actually like take it more seriously and see if I could match with someone. So I was like, I'm just going to go home and who knows, she like not saying she would have picked me anyways, but I like end up going home just hoping that I can come back into the house later when there's more like contestants in there, which we didn't even know if that was a thing. So I didn't know anyone could be brought back in. I was just kind of like hoping and praying that I could, and luckily it worked out. But yeah, during that time, I was just in the hotel gym, just working out all the time. Like, there was like really nothing else to do. Clearly I flopped on the push-up challenge, so I was like, let me just go to the gym, do some push-ups, and hopefully if I get back in, I'll do push-ups with any of these girls on my back.
Oh man, that's fun. Yeah, I forget. I forget about the push-up challenge. That one was fun. But I do forget that you were eliminated so early that nobody had really returned quite yet. So obviously the return factor, you wouldn't have done that. That does make sense. Yeah. Obviously, when you do return, you match with LC. Very. I would say one of the more genuine moments I think of the show was the first time you two meeting. Obviously, I talked to her the other day. She was very smitten by you. You guys were kind of smitten by each other, but it was like a genuine. I do love like there was a few people, in my opinion, especially you, that we're trying to find a perfect match, not necessarily the perfect match, quote unquote, but a match. But what was it kind of like that meeting the first time?
Yeah, it was awesome. We had talked like a little bit before, and so I had wanted to actually get to meet her. I had never actually met her in person. So yeah, it was nice seeing her. It was like a breath of fresh air because when I came back in, there were a lot of the same faces that I had already seen. But there were a few new ones, and she was one of them. And so it was nice to actually get to meet her. And yeah, she's obviously like super nice, super kind, like mature, like a lot of good things that maybe contrast with some of the other people in the house. So it was great. Yeah. The only thing is, obviously, we had very little time to really get to know each other because it was at the end of the whole show. But who knows what would have happened if we had met sooner.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I agree. And I do love that you guys kind of, whenever you guys met, like you were all deciding if you guys were perfect matches going in. You're like we've been here for like 30 seconds, guys. Let's not get crazy about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and honestly, the title of Perfect Match was always so confusing to me throughout the whole show because it's called Perfect Match, obviously, which sort of has, in my mind at least, I was sort of like putting that on a pedestal, like this is someone I could spend my whole life with if they're a perfect match. And so I was kind of like thinking on that mindset, but then I felt like the format of the show maybe was not quite conducive to that because it was more of a speed date type of a element where they would bring people in for like 5 hours to try to, like, especially later in the show, like when LC comes in, she's going to stand almost no chance trying to match with someone who's already been in a match for 5 weeks at that point. Like, how bad would that look if someone who had been in a relationship for 5 weeks just leaves because LC has been there for 2 hours? Like, how are you going to explain that? So yeah, the format was always kind of confusing to me throughout, but did my best.
Yeah, I do. I like that. I've said this a couple times, and I talked to Abby, and then I talked to Izzy too. It's like everybody, like we need a Netflix version of like the challenge. I think that would be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
obviously a lot of you that would like really succeed in that. I think it would just bring a different dynamic, and of course, it would bring all of you guys together as well. Um, One of the things that I love about the show is like the bonds with the cast. You know what I mean? I've seen several videos, and of course, between you and Shane, it's hilarious. You guys are hilarious together. But like, just the different. Was that something that really you took away from this entire experience? Was kind of more friendships than anything else?
Definitely got more friendships from the show. I will say though, my best reality TV driven friendships came from the circle. And I think that's because with the circle, it was all of our first show. So it was this new, exciting thing for us to bond over. Like our group chat after filming that, we were talking every single day, like all of us until our show aired. Whereas Perfect Match, by definition, we all came from existing shows. So it wasn't our first one. So it's like after filming, there were like different groups talking, but it wasn't like as a cast. We were like, oh, this is so cool. This is our first show, blah, blah, blah. So it missed like that sort of excitement bonding factor. But definitely did get new friends, new connections from it. But I would say as far as like stronger friendships, those come from the circle.
What is something that you learned about yourself on your journey through Perfect Match?
Yeah, there's actually one moment that I wish they had aired on my date with Savannah. So me and Savannah were kind of portrayed as this very strategic couple, strategic match. And so, but like on our date, they only showed us talking about strategy. But really, like she was talking about her family, I was talking about my family. We were like getting to know each other. And I remember at one point I was like talking about how like my mom and dad are such great parents, and like I was saying like how appreciative I was, and like I don't normally vocalize that stuff. or even like tell my parents that stuff. So like as I was saying it on the date, I started getting like emotional about it. I actually started like crying on our date, like tearing up, but they don't air any of that. But that was like a sort of enlightening thing for me because I was like, dang, like I do really appreciate my parents, but I don't really ever like explicitly tell them that. So it was like a little mental note that I made like in that moment. And I was actually really looking forward to my parents watching the show and being able to see that moment. But unfortunately, it didn't make the cut.
Oh, that's sweet. That is sweet though. I love that. Yeah, that's a good thing. All right. So then with that, what's it like watching this back?
It was good. It's definitely a good balance between laughter and drama and stress and all that. I will say episode one was a lot cringier than I thought it would be, as far as just my general like flirting that day. Like I knew I was extremely hammered that night. Like the next morning, I threw up for like 2 hours. So I learned my lesson, luckily, after that. But I knew the staircase thing was going to be a moment, like a bad rejection moment. But like I even laugh about that moment in my interview right after. So I wasn't like so worried about that. But I was just remembering like thinking that I had any sort of game with Francesca, and then watching it back, I was just like, no, this was a lost cause like since the beginning. So, but other than that, I was actually like I was pretty happy with the way I was portrayed the rest of the time. It seemed authentic and sort of goofy, awkward. Like I'm not like the cool guy, so I think it was fine.
All right. I have a few quick fire questions, maybe like either or, and you can just fire off whatever. So cats or dogs,
Dogs,
Pepsi or Coke,
Coke,
wine or beer.
beer. It though it does
Perfect.
kind of depend. I know we can't go into too much detail, but if it's a date, wine for sure.
That makes sense. Perfect match or the circle.
Circle.
After you said what you said earlier, I was like, I kind of was like, I was like, well, that was, I thought it was good. Like before you said what you said about the friendship and stuff like that, I was like, oh, this might be a hard one. But then I was like, no, probably not. But all right. So my last question to you, Nick, what's ahead for you? Where can everybody find your social media? What you got? What you got cooking?
Yeah, so all my social stuff, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, though I don't really use Snapchat too much, is all just my full name, Nick Uhlenhuth, and you spell Uhlenhuth just like it sounds. But that's all my socials. And then yeah, what's next for me? I would definitely do more TV. I'm definitely not opposed to it. I would, as you were kind of suggesting earlier, I would lean more towards like a challenge-esque type show, like a competition show rather than a dating show. Because with a competition show, if you want more airtime, you just have to be better than everyone, and I think I could do that. So, but that's that. And then yeah, I just work a normal corporate life still. I work at a basketball tech startup as a product manager, and it's going well. Super excited, and I'm in SoCal.
I love that. Yeah, I'm like really pushing like I really just I'm gonna keep pushing it to everybody I interviews. Like we want to challenge like, competition, maybe even like a survivor. I'm even throwing a survivor out, Netflix survivor. I think just that'd
Survivor.
be fun. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think it would be fun.